All right, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to the kick-off event for the second round of the business analytics competition at Saunders College of Business. We have one students in person and then a couple more people online. So this is great. And in the room we have with me here Professor Vic Parodies. So welcome everyone, and also online we have Professor Jing Tang and Professor Ali Boyasli. All of us are part of the committee to organize the challenge. So let's start. Raise your hand virtually or in person if you have participated in round number one.
I did.
Let's see how many of you actually. So a couple of you raise your hand. I have one online. Let me. I thought I disabled the waiting room, but I still have people stuck in it. Okay, so I have one people have participated in the first round, and the rest either is not raising their hands or did not participate, which is great because round two in here. We designed it so that it doesn't require you to really participate in round number one. So let's, without further ado, let me introduce you guys to the challenge and task that you guys are going to have in round number two. Walk you through the challenge, and then we open the floor for the questions from the students. Okay. So let me see. Let me share screen. So this is round two, the challenge and task for the competitions. The file at the moment, I believe, is either being uploaded on the website or it's going to be released very soon after the meetings. So you can have a chance to download and go through it in details for yourself. So right off the gate is, I want to note that again in here, the first round of the competition is not necessary or mandatory for the second round, but we do suggest students to check out the reflections from judges PowerPoint that we have online. So you have some ideas about what are some of the issues that we observed commonly in student submissions that would then help you to better position yourself in round number two. So the scenarios we have for round number two again is with Global Health Resource, which is a top-notch European hotel brand. And this time we give you guys a context of the hotel. In round number one, we did not reveal it. In this round, we revealed that the hotel is in Lisbon, Portugal. And similar to the first round, the hotel is concerning with the revenues or the potential revenues for the hotels. And they have suggested that the best way to approach this is to use these formulas. So they figure out that the potential revenues that they may have is coming from three different avenues. One is the revenue gains from hotel stays. So this calculated by using the length of the stays multiplied with the average daily rate, which then will give you the straightforward revenue stream for the hotels. The ADR here is noted is dynamically calculated based on a lot of different factors like the booking channels, the amenities included, customer types, and so forth. So there's a hint right here that if you want to really dig deeper into the revenues from hotel stays, look into the ADR to see what are the factors that drive ADR. Then there's two more new information in here. So revenue loss from free upgrades. Over time, when the customers come into the hotels, sometimes they would get different rooms types, not the type of rooms that they reserved. So we consider that to be an upgrade. So the greater the upgrade, the higher the revenues that the hotel may lost. So this is considered to be an opportunity cost rather than actual revenues lost. But nevertheless, if you give a good rooms to a customer by upgrade, that means that you'll not be able to use a room for another customer, right? So potentially there's a revenue loss in that sense. So let's say, for example, if a customer reserves room type A, which is a luxury room type, but then later on they get assigned a room type G, which is an executive room, then there's a potential here for revenue loss. So that also come into factor into the potential revenues for the hotel. Now, currently, the hotel doesn't have an exact formula for the cost calculation for those upgrades. So this is an opportunity for students here to delve deeper into that and see what really the cost impacts of those upgrades on revenues. And the last element in here is revenue lost from last-minute cancellations. So loss from last-minute cancellations occurs when a customer cancels within 3 days of the arrival date. So that often leaving not enough time for the hotels to find a replacement or different customers. So again, this is an opportunity cost, not an actual recognized revenue loss. But the longer the stay, right, if the customer cancel it, that means that there's a potential someone else did not have a chance to reserve that. Therefore, there's a cost for it. There's a penalty though. So for last-minute cancellations, then the customer would bear the cost of one night stay. So the hotel does recoup some of those lost revenues. So based on those formulas, we challenge you in this route to do 3 things. So one is to discuss the impact of the upgrades on revenues and then build a predictive models that helps the companies or the hotels to manage their upgrade policies. So look into the upgrades and see what is the impact on revenues and whether you can figure out what are the factors that predict the upgrade, whether the customer will receive the upgrade or not. That's number one. Number 2 is compare guests with last-minute cancellations and earlier cancellations. So you can figure out strategies that can optimize the cancellation policy. And the last one is to look into the potential revenues gained through hotel stays, either exploring strategies to lengthen the stays or improve the ADRs, improve the room occupancies and amenities. So purely from these 3 different avenues in here in the potential revenues calculations, you have 3 different branches that you can look into maximize the potential revenues for the hotel. So team can choose a mix of strategies. Some team may choose to do 3 of them, all 3 of them, which we hope you do. But some team may say, well, the other 2 may not be that interesting. So we're going to delve deeper into one of them. So it's really depending on your strategies, which one you think would then maximize your chance in here. Let me stop here to see if there's any questions from online students or students in the room. Yeah. Chat. Nothing yet. Okay. And then, moving on. So this time we provide a data set a little bit different than last time. Last time we have both hotels and the resort. This time we only use a hotel data set. to reduce the complexity of the challenge. We do provide you the data from 2015 all the way to 2017. Last time, there's only 2015 and 16, so we give you more data this time. One new piece of information, we also provide you the information on the room. So the hotel has 331 rooms, 237 are deluxe rooms type, which cover A, B, C, D, and then 94 are executive rooms and suite, so cover a mix of E, F, G room type. So about 80% of these are executive rooms, and then the smaller numbers are suite. We also suggest that you should look into the list of different festivals that are going on in Lisbon, so you can find a correlation between the festivals in the cities and also the demand for hotel rooms. So there's a lot of those lists online, students free to search for their own. And then again, the data dictionary is provided. Again, you are not limited to only the data. If you find a different data set that complement what we have in here, feel free to use. You may find, for example, a data set that related to Lisbon hospitalities or tourism. That can be useful. Then feel free to use that. Okay, let me stop here for a few minutes to see if there's any questions from online. Seeing none, so moving on here. Talking about objectives here is important. So if round number one, the focus will on visualization and storytelling. In this round, the focus is on data-driven strategies. We really want to emphasize that. We want students to remember that this is a business analytics competition. It's not a data science competition. So out of the three objectives you see, on three of them asking you to suggest strategies. So we want to see how well you justify your choices, how well you use data to support your conclusions, and draw meaningful strategies suggestions to your client. In this case, GHR. So we really encourage you to form teams that have a mix of technical and also measurement skills. Better yet, if you have students, teammates that have some tourism, hospitalities experience, that would be helpful. But the focus is a little bit different compared to the last round. Questions, comment in here. Okay. So for the deliverable, this round we ask for a report. So no more than 10-page report that cover the elements that we listed in here. And we also ask you to submit all of the technical files that you have. We note that we do not have a Kaggle submission system this time. So we ask that the file that you submitted should be in a working order, so that the judges can then duplicate and verify your results. This is particularly important for the predictive models. We want to run the predictive model and verify that the accuracy of the models or whatever metrics that you used. And then here you see the rest of the timelines. We're going to have a workshop in February 16th, so about 3 weeks from now. We meet again, then you could have a chance by then to go through the data at least, and undoubtedly have some more questions for us. The deadline for submission is March 8th, so that gives you about 2 months almost to work on the challenge. Then a panel of judges would then evaluate your submissions, and the finalists will be invited for in-person presentations on March 29th. That's when the final top 3 will be announced, and any other honorable mentions will also be announced. So it's worth to note that in the last round, we were so impressed by the amount of submissions and the quality of the submission we received. So we actually increased the prices, and we added one more price. Right? So the same thing can happen this round too. Even though we plan for only top three, but depending on the quality and also the number of submissions, then we would add different prices to honor those impressive submissions. Also, I want to note that for those of you who are new to the competitions and want to looking for teammates, you can send your email with your self-introductions, a little bit about who you are, your major, and then what you're looking for in terms of teammates to this email address. So someone would reach out to you and say, here's a list of other people that is also looking for teammates. Feel free to contact them. So this way you have ways to looking for teammates if you struggle with that. And you have the evaluation criteria at the end in here, and let you take a look at, on your own. So that is the round number 2 challenge, the challenge and task. We go through the data, the objective, and the details of challenge in here. So let me stop in here for a minute and see if there's any questions from the students online and also in class. Feel free to put that in chat too if you have any questions.
Can I ask you a question? Can you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Maybe you already said it. I might have missed it. Sorry, but are we gonna have to access this PDF after the meeting, or
Yes.
like
Yes.
the data set is was gonna be published after the meeting? But where are we gonna get an email? Sorry, thank you.
Good questions. So let's share screen one more time. So if you go to the website for the competitions, I'm assuming everybody know it, but let's put it in the chat. And in round number 2, now it's updated. You have the link in here to access round 2 data and challenge. When you click on it, you can have the data set CSV file here and the PDF that we just went through. So now you can have a chance to go through and digest it a little bit more carefully. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to note that the link for submit competition entry in here, you only have to use it by the deadline to submit your entries, your submissions. I think last round we have some students confused that you have to submit your name, to enter into your competitions. You do not have to do that. You participate by submit your solutions, and that's a link for submissions. Any other questions? Put a chat in here so that
approach?
I think it's a big challenge. So I think usually people need some time to go through and think more about it. Let's see. Anything we want to tell students? Let's leave it lonely here.
Yeah, here, join you. The only thing I was going to add as I listened to Professor Bowie present is the people that do the final evaluation are not necessarily technical people. They can appreciate good data analysis, but even more so when it is very clearly explained. In round number 1, we really focused on storytelling with data, and we had some absolutely amazing submissions. In this round, we focus more on the ability to use data to think about maximizing the potential revenue for this organization. But it's still very important to make clear communications to non-technical people as you're building your work. So you may very well get into detailed models that have, I don't know, a high degree of accuracy or a medium degree of accuracy in making predictions. But equally important to that accuracy is your ability to convey it, to convince a business person that they can maximize revenue in this way versus this other way. That's really what it's all about.
And I think it's worth to note that although we say our formula of potential revenue is equal to those 3 elements, but we are very open if you say that there's different avenues for that. Revenues maximization, right? And I think that so one of the criteria, if you look into the challenge, is creativity. So I think that would be an example of creativity, right? It's like besides 3 avenues, based on our analysis, we think that another avenue is this. And if we get convinced, that will be extra point for your creativity.
We saw a lot of creativity in round number 1 for sure. For sure, we'll see it again.
Yep. And again, like I said earlier, we have the freedom to adding more prices as we see fit, right? So last time we have an additional price for the best international team. Now this time, let's say we may have something like the most creative solution outside the box. They may not make it to the top 3, but it's impressive enough, we can have that. So I don't think the point here that we don't want to limit your imagination. And we design the challenge in a way that is quite open with a lot of revenue, a lot of avenues you can take. So feel free to explore.
We're going to have to say final questions. Do you have anything for us before we adjourn this meeting and you can study the data and the challenge itself? Hearing none.
So
thank you.
Thank you so much for your participations. If you have any questions, feel free to send the emails to us. And if it's a good questions, we usually try to communicate to participations that we have the email on hand. Okay. That's it for today. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day, guys. And good luck and have fun with your data explorations.
Have fun.